So I'm really excited to get into the topic today, and um, we're talking about sex and NVC and how that can help our sexuality. And I went to a NVC workshop. It was like a week-long retreat, and it was really interesting to be there with so many people intentionally trying to communicate well with one another. And I ended up meeting this girl and sleeping with her that week. And it was really like unlike any other sexual interaction I've ever had, like, because both of us were like, we want to like try to use NVC in this process. And oh my gosh, it was so powerful and healing to
Mm,
be able to pause in the middle of sex and to just like check in with each other. Like, is this what you want? Is this like, or like be able to express, like, feel comfortable to say, oh, I don't want that, but what about this? And like to just, it was healing in more ways than one. And actually, like, a lot of relationships from my past had surfaced in that process of like realizing how much I was longing for that in my own life. And so I'm
yeah.
really curious, Marianne, like, um what what brought what curiosity brought you to wanting to talk about this today?
Hmm. Yeah, good question. I think there's two things. One is that I know that there's sort of this, um, I think it's called sexual pleasure disparity, which means that for every one orgasm that a woman has, a guy has three orgasms. So there's a big
Mhm.
gap actually between that.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
so,
there is.
and I think that the way to get to more pleasure is to talk about it. Of course, not
Yep.
all the time be talking, but there is a talk, there are talks needed.
Mm.
And you might say, no, maybe it's more difficult, because I read about it and I was like, well, maybe it's more difficult for women to reach orgasm, but they actually check this, and when women and men are masturbating, they take the exact same time to reach orgasm. So it's not about that. So it's not something that
Mm.
bothers, for example, lesbian couples as much.
Mm.
So it really got me thinking, like, wow, there's this difference. And actually I think the difference is not, it's also immense interest that there's less of this difference, because I think when they can give a woman pleasure, that gives them pleasure as well. So especially in sex, pleasure is really, one person's pleasure is often the other person's pleasure. So and there's a lot of things that
Yes.
guys want that they don't dare to talk about either. So I think it's really for both. But there is something about, for me personally, like, wow, how is it possible that indeed I haven't had always had an orgasm when I wanted to, when I had sex with a
Mm.
guy. um so that's one thing. To have more pleasure, I think, is a fun goal.
Yeah,
Mm.
uh,
I would agree.
and we sometimes forget about that, don't we? Like, it becomes all serious, but actually, it's just about having pleasure. And why is that not just a great thing in itself?
Yeah, I
um
think we're like told this story sometimes, especially if you've grown up in a religious upbringing, that
mm,
like pleasure is a bad thing, and like that probably means you're sinning or you're like not doing something good. And so
yeah.
I don't know if we talk a lot about how that affects our own psyche, and like how that affects our relating with one another, and like that being able to give each other pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's either bad or,
Yeah.
and even if you're not brought up religious, like for me, it's also something like, oh, it's an afterthought, it's superficial or something. It's, I don't
Mm.
know, like something about it is, yeah. Um, yeah, so that's one thing. And the other thing is that for me, one of the worst things I've been through have to do with me not being able to set boundaries in sex. So really, like,
Mm-hmm.
having non-consensual sex, not because I'm forced by someone, not because I'm held down or something, but just because I don't know how to really feel myself and to say no, or to say, I might like it, but I really need this kind of foreplay to get in the mood.
Mm.
So there's pain in me about it, and I've done a lot of work in this area, and I really wish for me, it comes down to a lack of education. That's why I didn't know how to speak up about it. So I really wish for
Yeah.
people to, and I was young when that happened. I was 19, but I know from so many people that when I speak with them, especially I talk a lot with women, but I think it goes for men as well, that they are enduring things, like you're kind of like, oh, I'm kind of okay with this person touching my boob. I think I might like it in a minute, but actually you're not. You don't have this full yes, what MVC calls a full yes, which I think is a helpful term because it really, really helps you to connect with, it's not okay to even have a half yes for something.
Right. Because
So,
then
yeah.
you're somehow compromising in some way where all of your needs are not all being filled.
Yeah.
I don't, for part of this, like for me, I feel like I've really connected with, in a sexual way, with my own body and what I really like and how I really like it. And it's unfortunate though that I had a person that I was with who just, he suffered a lot from depression, and it really stopped us from exploring a lot of things sexually. And I was beginning to learn a lot about me and myself and how do I express that to him. And I was continuing to get pushback, so I just haven't actually been able to explore all of the things with myself with somebody who was willing to do that. How does depression work with all of that? How do you ask for what you want without shame of them feeling like pressured or forced into something they don't want to?
So yeah, there's a few things. I mean, so was it the case he didn't want to have any sexual interaction with you, right?
Yeah.
And did you feel like he was working on the depression?
No. I mean, no.
Okay.
At the time he was seeing a therapist. I just don't think that it was really working as well as it probably could have been.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
because there's a difference for me between what you want to do with MVC and what maybe could have helped. Would you have known about MVC is indeed to connect with him and to really say that, hey, I imagine you have a lot on your mind, and still I would love to explore this topic. Are you open for that? And to see if that would get you somewhere, in the sense that maybe there was room for something if you would be heard in, I'm afraid that I will lose my erection because I'm feeling so, I've heard a lot about men who have problems in their daily life and they think they're a failure. They have these jackals and judgments about themselves, and that reflects in their libido and in their ability to have an erection. And so say that, but I'm guessing now because we don't have your ex-partner here, but if something like that would be going on, I can imagine it would help to talk about that and to say like, okay, how about we try it for 5 minutes?
there was a moment like that has happened. And I didn't even think about talking about it, where it was really actually hard to stay hard.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to say. I just was trying to hold space for him because I know that it could be feeling embarrassing or like a failure, like you were saying.
Yeah.
There just wasn't that open communication to like really talk about it in a comfortable space where he probably felt a lot of shame maybe. So yeah, I resonate with what you're saying with that.
Yeah. And then there is this, so that's one approach, right? You try to connect with someone and see, often there's a lot more possible than you think. And sometimes if someone is really, and I'm not saying that this was the case with your ex, I don't know. If someone really, is not willing to change something about their depression, and something big like a depression has a huge effect on the other partner as well, not just your sex life, I imagine the whole relationship. To put boundaries and to say something like, for me, it's really important for my mental health. It's important that something changes with the depression. So can we make an agreement about that? And that's something that is of course really a tough talk to have, especially because someone has a depression. But yeah, it can be necessary and some for you, and sometimes actually it can be helpful for the partner as well to get like
Yeah.
this kind of, to be required to change, kind of, not demanded, but to be required in a way.
I wish that was the case for him.
You
You
wish
would
that,
think that I would have been a motivator, but
we're all at different.
it's just too deep.
yes, and that's a good point. Like sometimes someone is not able to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at first, you know, when I was, because I've never actually had this happen before in all of the partners that I've had who have struggled with depression, and there was a sense of rejection. There was a sense of feeling, is it me? Oh my God. And I would have this panic attack, like anxiety sitting in my chest that would be really fluttery, and it would be hard to breathe. Almost like a dagger is like stabbing me. So I would lay there after I got rejected, and I just feel so awful, like he doesn't want me, you know, so am I unworthy or not enough for you? I mean, how I've never experienced this type. I know rejection is not NVC because it's someone doing something to me. I felt maybe embarrassed and just wanted connection in a sexual way.
Yeah, I can imagine that's very painful. And there's also this, especially when there's this story, I think, in society that men want sex all the time, which is not true. You know, this is a pressure that we put on men. And then, like I said, if they don't want it, oh my God, what's wrong with me? It becomes this, this very painful situation. Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine that if there could have been a talk of like, you know what, I really feel insecure right now. I want to have sex with you and you don't want it. And now I have this story that maybe you're not attracted to me, or that maybe there's something wrong with me. And can you give me some reassurance that you still find me attractive sexually as well?
Yeah.
Even though maybe right now the mood is different for you.
Yeah, I ended up cuddling with one of my friends one evening, and I didn't like that we were in the living room because there were other people in the house. And I was like, "Oh, do you want to go down to my room?" And she was like, "Oh, I'm not sure." I'm like, and so in my head, I was thinking I just wanted to cuddle, and we ended up going to my room, and then she's taking her clothes off, and I'm thinking, oh, this is not what I wanted, but I'm a guy, so I should want this. So I guess this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And then it was like this, like, not staying connected with what was alive in me and what I needed, and just working off of my assumptions of what I should be, and working off the assumptions of what she wanted in that situation, and being like, okay, I guess this is what she wants, so I'll just give this to her. And ended up being very painful experience for me. And that to me seems like the beginning of all of this is to be very clear about what's alive in you in that situation. I'm hearing, Katie, from you that like that pain that you're experiencing, you wanted so badly for this intimacy to be met by this other person, and you were trying to get that from this person for so long, and it built this like maybe frustration and maybe grief in you, that at the end, realizing that, oh, this person doesn't have the capacity to meet that need in me, began that grief of letting go of that strategy of meeting that need.
I have different thoughts in me, that things that I would like to add to both of you are saying. To what you're saying, Katie, what I love about NVC is that it says that we have a universal need, like everyone has the need to mourn sometimes. So that mourning is not just, you know, something that just happens to you. It's something that you need to take time for. And that happens when, you know, when we want something and our strategy is just not possible. And that we really need yeah, I guess also in your sex life, like maybe you're happy with your partner, but there's this one thing that they really don't want to do. And I'm going to give some tips about how you can handle like conflict in your sexual interest. But say that, you know, it's just off the table, you want to have, I don't know, anal sex, and they're like, no freaking way, not even want to talk about it.
Right.
And yeah, maybe if you really love that idea, maybe you need to mourn that, to just feel the sadness or the frustration or the disappointment that maybe if this is a long term partner, that maybe it's not going to happen for you for a long time, or maybe never. So yeah, I think that's also part of, yeah, connecting with another person, and yeah, to really make space for the
Yeah.
mornings. Yeah. And what you were saying, Kyle, about yeah, it was interesting for me to hear that you could relate to that thing about the story about how men are supposed to feel aroused instantly and also always want sex with any woman. um, and this is, and actually, and you said like the first point is to connect with yourself, and that would also be my first point, to really, like, the more you're dissatisfied with your sex life, to really sit down and to write down. I would actually recommend to write down first like a whole list of thoughts that you have about what you should and shouldn't do, what you have to do. Like I actually made a list, and I can read, if you like, I can read a few that I had myself, like I did this a while ago, and just to explore, like, what are all the things that I probably got from, I don't know, my parents or society or whatever. And the thoughts that I will read, I want to I want to say that I don't believe them necessarily. It's just a part of me that is sticking to them, but still they
Right.
have an effect, right? So I have this thought of what I should and shouldn't do. I should not be on my period, and if I am, I should be apologetic about it. I should hold my farts in.
Oh no. That's not, oh, that's hilarious. Our family just lets him go.
My face should look sexy during sex, but still elegant and not too animal-like. Let me see, just a few more. I should ideally know how someone likes to be touched immediately and without getting any instructions. I should be comfortable about my body, but not say that I agree that I look beautiful, because then they might think I'm arrogant. Um, this one I'm a little bit shy about. I'm allowed to want threesomes, but I shouldn't actually love another woman like I would love a man. So these were just like a few. I mean, I have a lot more of them. And what I would recommend, like, if you do this, if you sit down and write down all your shoulds and have tos that you have towards yourself, and you could also see what you have towards your partner, right? What should your partner do? What is part of you thinking? And it could be not so rational, but just like, you know, what are some parts of you thinking? And it can be helpful to really tell yourself, instead of telling yourself these thoughts like, oh, I should not be on my period, to tell yourself, to put something before it, which is, I have a thought that I should not be on my period, or I'm telling myself a story that I should not find myself very beautiful, or I have a judgment that I should be waxed at all times, or anything like that, to put a little prefix before it, so you have a little bit of distance to this sort of inherited thoughts that we could have. Yeah, and something
I like
similar.
that.
Yeah, you like that? Okay. Yeah, something similar, to make also a list about all the assumptions that you have about your partner. So for example, I'm assuming that they want ... I'm assuming that they don't want this and this. I'm assuming that they think this and this. And to really start checking these things with your partner. Like, hey, I'm actually assuming that you don't want to ever have sex in nature. Is that true? Or, you know, whatever it is that you're assuming. I'm assuming that you actually don't like my butt. Is that true? You know, like, just
Right.
to really check all your thoughts, and to say, I know it's maybe not true, but I just need to hear it. I just need to hear confirmation.
Yes. I think that's so helpful to lay that out like that. And it gives you an exploration for a day that say you're not having sex that night or something, where you could just explore this and say, here are some things. And hopefully, in my mind, I'm thinking that sometimes people may take it personally when you say, oh, I assume that you may like this. I don't know, or hurt their feelings. It's just, it gives such a more of an open conversation to have and get down to the nitty gritty of like, oh, actually, no, I don't really like that. And yeah, you're right. You were assuming correct that yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and like if someone responds with like some offense, like feeling like attacked, or like it seems offensive, maybe is a better way of saying it. It's like a great opportunity to get curious about, you know, what it is that is going on inside them. How is that affecting you?
Yeah, I like that you don't wanna only say things that would not ever get you into discussion or conflict, or that can actually be bonding if you know how to navigate it. Yeah. And I would say, like, you were just saying something and I wanted to react to saying that it's helpful to like, if you start talking about sex and you feel nervous about it, to really acknowledge that, to actually start by saying, oh, how is it to talk about sex? Actually, you know, I'm super nervous because I don't know, maybe I'll hurt you, or maybe or I have these things that I might like, and I'm maybe you'll judge me for it, or
yes,
to not pretend, because sometimes we want to pretend, oh, now I'm a grown up and I should be super cool about this, and yeah, I can talk about sex, but actually we're totally freaking out. Yeah, I think if you want to have honesty, start with that honesty about how is it actually to talk about this.
It sets a precedence for being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what other tips do you have for us that you've been thinking about as you think about this topic?
Well, we were diving into some tricky things and I would like to get back to it, but maybe before that, I'm thinking also for people that just are super uncomfortable to talk about anything around sex. How do you get started? You know, say that you have been together for a decade and you haven't talked about sex at all. Like, how do you get this conversation starting?
Yeah.
So I would recommend to indeed first do some more connection with yourself, so you have a bit of an idea, like what's going on in me when it comes to this topic, and start also figuring out what are the words that you want to use. Like, for example, for your genitals, like what's the word that you feel comfortable with, because otherwise you're going to be like, your thingy, you know, like you don't know which word even to use. And to also check actually with your partner, like how do you want to call your penis? Is it your dick? Is it your cock? Is it your penis? Like what word do you like, or do you have a name for it? And I would actually recommend also for women to have a name for their vagina, or for their vulva, vagina, whatever, the whole area. Just so you get a bit more, so you can name it something, and so you can really have a relationship with it. So if you're uncomfortable, start by figuring out the vocabulary, knowing what the anatomy, like how are the different parts called and how do I want to call them, and then actually starting with a little bit more, a little bit smaller, with just starting to compliment your partner, compliment their body, compliment what they're doing, say that you like something, just to get a little bit, to get talking about sex, but in a like positive way, as opposed to immediately having to address a problem, which could be a big step. And also kind of to give praise about when you're talking about sex and you know that it's a big challenge, to really be like, oh, I'm so happy we discussed this, you know, I know it's hard for us, so I'm really glad that you were able to open up and that you were willing to do this, even though maybe we felt awkward, or to really acknowledge that. And also I recommend, and maybe this is actually fun for anyone, to make a bucket list of everything that you ever would like to do in sex. And then, you know, if you have the list and you're going to share it with each other, even if there's something that you find very scary, I mean, it's on the list, so all you have to do is just read it up, like read it out loud. It makes it a little bit easier. And I also have some yeah, you can work with some kind of conversation starters if you would like to explore things and to, for example, have some questions about that you can ask about someone's history, like what was your primary source of sex education, how was your first time, what about your history makes sex challenging for you, what function does sex have for you, what needs does it meet, because that's what I find interesting about
Oh,
NVC.
yeah.
It actually says that sex itself, like the deed, is not a need. Like sexual expression or sexuality is a need,
Right.
and so one way to meet it is to have sex. But having sex could meet like many needs. It could meet, maybe I'm curious what needs it meets for you, just to
The first one that comes to mind is play.
play.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I resonate with it as
I
well.
like that.
Intimacy.
I would, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I always write down closeness because I'm so quality time / physical touch. So it really brings in physical touch and that closeness, tenderness, just affection of feeling like someone's paying attention to me. Those are the needs that are met for me when I have sex with somebody.
Be seen.
To be seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting, right? It can be very different for everyone, and very interesting to know what it is for your partner, because then also sometimes you could explore other ways to meet those same needs if you're not in the mood for sex, for example. Yeah, and if you have a need for sexual expression and you don't have a partner because it's COVID or because of whatever reason, there's also different ways to kind of express it, like for example in dancing or flirting or anything like that. So it helps sometimes to get some creativity, I find. Yeah. And you could ask, like I have a little list of things that different things you can do in sex that you can ask your partner, like, how do you feel about these things? So how do you feel about slow sex? How do you feel about sex toys? How do you feel about porn? What do you think about dirty talk? Or how do you relate to boundaries in sex? Just to have a few things to get yourself talking. And I would recommend in general for everyone to have regular talks about your relationship, so that if you ever want to bring up something about your sex life, it's not like we have to talk, you know, like, dun, dun, dun. Everyone gets scared. But it's more like, okay, we have our monthly, I always do a monthly check-in with my partners, and then if there's something bothering me, I can bring it up there, and it's not like, it doesn't get as heavy because we know we get together to talk about things. And yeah, so that makes it a bit easier as well. Yeah. And so another, like, if you are we talked a little bit about this, how to talk while you're having sex, because all of this is more like preparing, right? So what I really like is the idea, and that's actually something that NVC teaches as well. Instead of saying, if you're doing something, instead of saying, is this okay? It's quite likely that people are a bit programmed to say yes to that, because they might be a bit pleasing. So instead of saying, is this okay? To say something like, how would it be if I do this? Or how can I make this feel even better? Or how would you like me to continue now? To really ask these open-ended questions. How are you feeling? To really, instead of this, is this okay? And someone's like, and they're actually dying inside. Yeah.
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, I mean, me too.
Totally.
Yeah, that's why it's funny, right? Because people do that. Yeah.
And also with just those questions too, it seems to me, because if something isn't necessarily working and you ask these questions, that it's okay that it may take time to explore that and to get it right. I mean, even in the bedroom or anything that you do, it takes practice, it takes time to get to know. So asking these questions, and if you don't get it right the first time, There'll be the next time.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I have a funny story about that actually.